Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My clock just turned 3 o'clock. I'd like to stay on time as close to possible today. So if go ahead and just take another 5 to 10 seconds to get yourself prepared, and I'll go ahead and move us through the slides. First and foremost, before we get too deep into the weeds of our conversation today, I wanted to do some quick welcome and introductions. We have folks from the department here today, specifically those that are working directly on this project. I would ask if when your name comes on the screen, if you wouldn't mind unmuting or even taking yourself on video and just doing a brief introduction. So I'll start with Leanne.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Leanne Larson. I'm the coordinator for the early learning team in the Department of Education. I'm also the coordinator for this request for applications process.
Okay, and my name is Nicole Medora. Good afternoon. I'm the early childhood specialist at the Department of Education. Marcy Whitcomb is our early childhood monitor. She's also on our team here at the Department of Education. Marcy is on a well-deserved vacation today, so unfortunately she's not with us, but she is available for any monitoring or technical assistance needs regarding public pre-K. Nina.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nina Cunningham. I'm the Head Start State Collaboration Director. So I work with Head Start and Early Head Start programs across the state.
Thank you. And Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Hicks, and I am the Children's Cabinet Coordinator in the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future.
Perfect. Thank
Nicole,
you. Yes.
I wonder if we could also take a moment to have Paula and Scott introduce themselves.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Leanne.
Thank you.
Team members. We also have other members from our department today joining us to answer questions as they may arise. So Paula, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paula Gravel. I'm the school finance manager on the school finance and operations team. My main focus is the school funding formula, essential programs and services.
Thank you, Paula. And Scott Brown.
Yes, I am Scott Brown, and I'm the Director of School Construction Programs for the department. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And I can't see our participant list, but I think that's all. If not, please feel free to follow suit. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and move us along. Today's session will be recorded. We anticipate it'll be posted at the website posted below here. It's maine.gov/doe/learning/early-childhood/resources. I believe the link will also be available on our procurement site. I do not have the address for that, so I wanted to at least give folks the opportunity to copy down this link where we anticipate the recording will be also stored. Just leave it there for a second in case anybody's taking a note. Okay, some important dates of which to be aware. So in the past, just not too long ago, September 24th is the date that this RFA was released. So for the purpose of today's discussion, you'll likely hear us refer to this as the RFA. That's the initials for request for application. It's the process in which these grants will be awarded to SAUs. Here we are today, October 7th, 2021, and this is our informational session for any interested parties. It is open to the public. We have it scheduled for 2 hours. If it takes 2 hours, great. If not, no need for you to stick around longer than needed. So when the time comes that we feel like everybody's needs and questions have been met, we'll be sure to make that known and wrap up early if it happens to be that way. A week from tomorrow, October 15th, this is the date that any questions about the RFA need to be submitted. We do have some more information coming up in the slides today that will talk in greater detail about questions submittal, but just wanted folks aware of the deadline for that. October 15th. Soon after that, on the 21st, is our internal team's job to have any answers to submitted questions posted publicly. Those will be on the procurement website, which again will be posted in detail in a few more slides. November 4th, that's the date of submission for any applicants. That'll be here before we know it. So hopefully after today's informational session and any questions that come up between now and October 15th, folks will have what they need to submit on time on the 4th. Again, more specific instructions to follow. Any questions that you have today can be populated in the chat box. Nina and Anna are here to help us sort of monitor the chat box. If there are any questions that we're not confident in responding to or that need further research or further consideration, then we'll be sure to follow up with those after the session. Okay, so the RFA, page 1, today's informational session really follows the structure of the RFA. So if you happen to have it available, feel free to follow along. If you don't have it open, then no worries, because we're going to go through it pretty much section by section in the next hour or two. So we're going to start off quickly with just a brief overview of this grant opportunity. So it's our anticipation that through this application, the DOE, we intend to provide grant funding to school administrative units, SAUs, to increase the number of eligible 4-year-olds attending high quality public pre-kindergarten or pre-K programming. So emphasis is really brought down on the eligible 4-year-olds as well as high quality. So our next few slides will dig a little deeper into that as well and just exactly what we mean by that. There are 2 statutes that relate directly to this RFA. The first one being Title 20A, which is our public preschool programs for children of 4 years of age. And this link is there, as well as Public Law 2021, Chapter 483, Part R, Section 2, which details the funding pieces. Sorry. So this funding will be provided through our state's American Rescue Plan allocation. And SAUs may apply for grant funding awards for a 1-year period. So it's meant to support new and expanded programming during the 22-23 school year. So 1 year from now, next school year. When we say new, we mean brand new classrooms and SAUs that have not had a public pre-K program thus far. So that's the new piece. Expanded programming could encompass 2 different things. So the first one being programs that already exist in SAUs and that they're looking to expand seats. They're looking to add more classrooms, therefore to enroll more 4-year-olds. Expansion could also be programs that already exist, but they operate on a half-day or a half-week schedule, and they're looking to expand that for students. So instead of offering half-day, half-week, they might move to offer full-day, full-week programming. That is also considered an expansion for grant funding under this RFA. Additionally, pending funds available after school year 22-23, it is our intent to continue to offer an RFA for SAUs to apply for grant funding, again, to start or expand programming or to continue your projects funded with the grants during the following school year, 23-24. Per statute above, Public Law 2021, preference will be given to SAUs that are seeking to establish public pre-K programming for the first time, new programs, before awarding grants to expansion programming. Also, per statute, competitive priority will be awarded based on the percentage of economically disadvantaged students served by the SAU. So some more information in the application will come around that as well. Moving on with the overview, funding may also be used to increase the amount of time 4-year-olds are attending public pre-K programming. So that's what I mentioned as another expansion scenario. Programs funded through these grants must be in compliance with the standards governing public pre-K programs in Maine, which is DOE Rule Chapter 124. So these are our basic approval standards for our public preschool programs. So similar to Chapter 125, which has basic approval standards for K-12, Chapter 124 is for public pre-K. We highly encourage you to access our pre-K guidebook. There's a visual here on the side in this little oval shape. This is a tool that we've developed on our website in collaboration with our folks on our early learning team to help support pre-K programming development and to be of as high quality as possible. The link for the guidebook is here. It's kind of long. It's available on our early childhood website under public preschool, which that link will also be provided in just a few moments. So only eligible children may be supported by these pre-K expansion grant funds. So eligible children are defined as those who will be at least 4 years of age on October 15th of the school year in which they are enrolled. So similar to kindergarten age eligibility being 5, pre-K age eligibility is 4. So unfortunately, these funds cannot be used to support 3-year-olds, just 4-year-olds on or before October 15th. All proposed general education pre-K classrooms should be inclusive of eligible 4-year-olds, including those who are economically disadvantaged, who may or may not have disabilities. Of course, children with disabilities must be placed in the least restrictive environment, or the LRE, that's determined by the IEP team. So if it's determined that a child's LRE be a public general education classroom and they are of age to attend, then absolutely we encourage inclusivity of those students as well. Also, English learners. Any proposed costs that come in through the RFA on your application budget should be reasonable and justifiable. My apologies. SAUs will be required to document how your proposed grant funding will be combined with allocations derived from the essential programs and services funding, so your EPS funding. That will be part of the application, as well as address any demonstrated needs that the applicant SAU documents through a thorough community needs assessment. We have more information on what a community needs assessment is, and we're happy to answer any questions on specificity of that. SAUs are also required to demonstrate how your program will sustain the pre-K program beyond the period of the grant funding. So while our early learning team is really ecstatic at the opportunity to be able to support SAUs in starting or expanding their programs, it's really, really important to us that those programs last for years to come, and not just for the year or two that grant funding is awarded. So as you develop your applications, please be mindful of and demonstrate how your district plans to sustain the pre-K program beyond the years of this grant opportunity. A few more bullets to highlight here. So applicant SAUs are encouraged to partner with licensed community providers and/or other SAUs. So licensed community providers are those in your community who serve children of a young age, more specifically, potentially 4-year-olds. Sometimes these might be Head Start locations. They might be child care centers, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs. They might be privately owned family child cares. There's really no limit to who you could partner with, except to say that some type of a relationship or conversation is had regarding the SAU's intent to start or expand a pre-K program, and just to be mindful and considerate of how you might partner with those in your community who serve the same students and the same families in some capacity. Public pre-K programs may be offered by SAUs on school grounds or at other facilities in your community. We know that the expansion of pre-K in Maine has been slowed down greatly by the lack of space to physically house students and staff and pre-K programs. So please know that this grant funding can support on-school or off-school property facilities. Some more information coming. Keep saying that, but trust me, we'll get there. SAUs retain responsibility for setting and meeting program goals, ensuring compliance with state and federal laws and rules as evidenced through monitoring and reporting, and maintaining fiscal controls and records. And the applicant SAU must serve in the capacity of the fiscal agent. So all grant funding awarded will flow from the Department of Education to the SAU. Allowable expenses. So the ARP grant, the funding that we have available for awarded SAUs through this RFA, your costs can be associated with the following: the purchase of equipment, materials, and supplies necessary for operating high quality programs. So think those one-time big ticket items that we know every public pre-K program of high quality needs. So specific furniture, curriculum, books, assessment tools, things of that nature. Grant funding can also be used for purposes such as retrofitting classroom spaces. Some of our schools don't have public pre-K programs in them because the space that they might have available isn't equipped for 4-year-olds, right? Maybe it was equipped for older students or certainly taller students potentially. There are expectations around having a water source available, having a bathroom nearby, things of that nature. So keep in mind that if you have a space that needs to be retrofitted for 4-year-olds, please consider using these funds for that. As well as establishing or retrofitting playgrounds. Leasing space for operating classrooms. So this particular ARP funding can be used for leasing. And I actually think that there's one. No, okay, I'm gonna get too far ahead of myself. Unfortunately, it can't be used for the purchase of buildings such as modular units, for example, but certainly a district could look into leasing a modular unit and operating classrooms that way. We have other programs available at the department as well in regards to leasing space that SAUs could consider. There's also the ESSER funds that can be used for the purchase of space, but this particular money cannot be used for purchasing of modular units, outdoor space, but can be for leasing or rentals. Can also be used for establishing outdoor learning spaces. So different than indoor classrooms, different than outdoor playgrounds, outdoor learning spaces are just that, spaces outdoors in nature that accommodate the curriculum for students in pre-K. Can be used for providing snacks and meals, providing transportation. We have some further guidance in Appendix A around the transportation of 4-year-olds. Can be used to coordinate public pre-K programming, particularly in the case of programs operated in partnership with community providers. It can provide professional learning related to the provision of high quality pre-K. Salary and benefits. These can be used, or money can be used for this, only for education technician positions in districts that are starting full day, full week pre-K programs or expanding current pre-K programs from part day, part week to full day, full week. So the big thing to take away here is your program at the end of this application going to operate in a full day, full week manner? If the answer to that is yes, then you could apply for funding through this RFA to support the salary and benefits of your ed techs, okay, your assistant teachers in this space. Unfortunately, it cannot be used at the moment for your lead teachers. Indirect costs or unrestricted costs, which may not exceed FY23 proposed percentage rate for the SAU of the total funds requested. This is a Tyler Backus question. So Tyler works with Paula on our finance team, and contacting him with any specific questions around your estimated rate is encouraged. The next 3 slides, I'm just going to highlight for you quickly what the competitive priorities of this RFA are. So we shall award competitive priority points for proposals that meet the following criteria. Number one, the level of economic disadvantage. So priority points will be given as follows. If your SAU has less than a 45% economically disadvantaged rate, then there will be no extra points provided. If you fall between the 45 and 60% mark, 3 points will be awarded. And if your SAU serves more than 60% of students who qualify for economically disadvantaged services or free and reduced lunch, then 5 points will be awarded. The second competitive priority for this RFA is for those SAUs that are seeking to establish a formal partnership with the licensed community provider. So like I said earlier, the Head Starts, the YMCAs, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the licensed providers in your community that are family-based or center-based. So priority points are either 0 or 5. So 0 for no partnerships, 5 points awarded for at least one partnership with the community partner. The last competitive priority is for those that are seeking to operate full day, full week programming. So here you'll see how that lays out. If you plan to operate a minimum of 10 to 14 hours per week, then there will be no additional points awarded. 15 to 19 hours per week will award 3 points. At least 20 hours per week, but less than full day, full week will award 4 points. And those operating more than 20 hours a week at what we consider a full day, full week will be awarded 5 points. So I'm going to turn it over now to Leanne. She's going to walk us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, so in this portion of the informational session, we're going to talk about the actual components that are part of the application itself. So it's very important in order for an RFA to be scored that a complete package is submitted to the Division of Purchases by that November 4th deadline. And we're going to walk through what that will include. So there are several sections to the application that need to be attended to. There's what is called a general information session, and there will be, on this slide, we're just going to talk about the sort of the titles of the 4 or 5 sections, but we'll get into detail about each of these in a few minutes. So there's a general information section. There's a portion that details your needs assessment and community coordination. There's a section that's about the project overview. And then there is a section about project description as well as your budget. So let's look into each one of these. So the documents that are included within the application that make up the general information are not going to earn points. They will be scored on a pass-fail scoring system. But if all of these are not passed, the application will not be scored. So even though they're not going to earn any points, it is critical that you make sure to include these in your application. There are several that could be coming in within your application. 2 that will absolutely need to come in no matter what, whether you're applying with or without a partner. 1 that would come in if you are going to be proposing a project that involves partnership with a community provider. The first required piece in this section is the application cover page and general assurances. This is on page 11 of the RFA. The second is the debarment, performance, and non-collusion certification that you can find on page 12 of the application. Both of these are absolute musts. If you are intending to apply in a partnership with community providers, whether it's 1 or multiple providers, which is strongly encouraged as an option, it will be important that you complete a listing of partners and that you obtain a letter of intent from each partner. And that's the indication from the partner that they are aware of the submittal of this application and that it's accurate what you are proposing. They are on board with it. We can go on to the next slide, Nicole. Thanks. In the next section, which is the project overview, this is the opportunity for applicants to clearly describe the project's intended goals, and then also to outline which of the following strategies the SAU will be engaging in. Are you looking to start a public pre-K program for the first time? Are you looking to expand your program by adding classrooms? Are you looking to expand from your current part day, part week programming to full day, full week programming? I want to address those three options for just a second, because I saw a question that came up in the chat box earlier. It is certainly allowable to do both, for instance, expanding current classrooms that might be part day to full day, and also add additional classrooms. That is allowable. You don't have to pick only one of these, but you need to be doing at least one of these in order to apply. Your overview should also describe the current status of public pre-K within your SAU and summarize within this section of your proposal how much you expect to be increasing enrollment and what the dosing or the amount of time would be in the proposal for your programming in the 22-23 school year. I also just want to be clear, it is not a requirement to apply with a community provider. That is an option. But if you do apply, you need to have those letters of intent if you are going to be in partnership. Next part of the application is the needs assessment and community coordination piece. So within this section of your proposal, it's going to be very important for the SAU to be able to describe the needs that they have identified related to the provision of public pre-K and how their proposal is going to address those needs. So considering some of the following factors will be pieces that you want to attend to and make part of a community needs assessment and that coordination effort. First, you want to be able to demonstrate that there has been coordination with other early childhood programs and agencies serving children and families in the community to maximize resources. We recognize that not all SAUs have opportunity to have even other early childhood providers within their community or catchment area, but many, many do. And so it's very important that you have done outreach and talked about, is it possible to think about that kind of a partnership? It's also critical to have paid attention to what are the extended childcare needs of working parents. This comes into consideration when you're thinking about whether the program that you're proposing to offer would be part day or full day. Third, provision of public notice regarding the proposal to the community has been served, meaning that you have notified providers within your catchment area of the intention to start a public pre-K program or potentially expand that program. And then finally, making sure that you have demonstrated coordination with child development services so that they are aware that public pre-K programming is potentially going to get underway and may provide an option, as Nicole mentioned earlier, for the least restrictive environment for youngsters who have identified disabilities. Very important within this section is making sure that the SAU has built a clear case for how the proposed project will address the identified needs within the community and lead to better outcomes for children and families. The next section of the application is the project description. In this section, you're going to be attending to the pieces of high quality program design. So the description will include the following, but not necessarily be limited only to these pieces. So this is the place to make sure that you are describing the number of additional students that you estimate you will be serving, the number of new classrooms you would be adding, and the estimated ratio of children to teachers per classroom, the length of the school day, and the number of days that students would attend per week. Be providing a description of where the program will be housed and how the space will adhere to requirements in Chapter 124 and or be licensed through Maine's child care licensing system. Additionally, the description should include the evidence-based curriculum and assessment system that will align with Maine's early learning and development standards, or a plan for how these decisions will be made prior to opening programs. The department recognizes that you may not be in a position to select that instructional programming at the time of the submission of your application. And if you're not going to settle on what that programming will be, you can outline how you will go about determining that. The multi-tiered system of support and plans for inclusion. A plan for staffing that meets required credentials that you find in Chapter 124. Professional learning that would be provided for pre-K instructional staff and administration. Coordination and management plan for pre-K programming. How will that be managed? A plan for engaging families and how that will be incorporated, including how families will be informed about students' progress. And transition strategies that will be utilized as children enter and exit pre-K. There are some additional components to the application. If you are planning to propose projects in which you are in partnership with a community provider, you need to include this section and describe what the nature of that collaboration is going to be and how that partnership will support the provision of public pre-K. I noticed a question earlier in the chat box about the benefits potentially of partnering. There are a number of benefits to engaging in partnerships with community providers. I'm going to name just a couple at this point, but then also suggest that if that is an area of interest, the department has recorded a 3-part session about partnering, which could be helpful. You will also find a whole appendix about partnership development in the RFA. So I would strongly encourage taking a look at that if that's an area that you want to pursue. And the department certainly encourages that. Partnerships often can result in making certain that students have access to full day experiences or wraparound childcare or other services, particularly if you're in partnership with a Head Start provider or a child care provider. It often leads to much less transition for children. It makes the experience much smoother for families, because children are not necessarily having to move from one setting to another throughout the day. And it's also a wonderful way of supporting coordination across and between school systems and early childhood providers within your community. So if that's an area that you are looking for more guidance, you can certainly reach out to the department for some assistance with that. We can provide technical assistance in that area. The next section of the application that's part of the project description is the recruitment and enrollment piece. Your proposal should outline the methods that you intend to use, either you as the SAU or your partners, in terms of recruiting children for the program, particularly how to reach some of the harder to reach families or populations within your community. Additionally, if your program is not going to necessarily be universal, meaning that you're able to serve all 4-year-olds in your catchment area that want to take part in public pre-K, it will be important that you have clearly outlined what your enrollment policy would be and how it will be inclusive of populations. The department strongly encourages SAUs to make sure that their enrollment policy mirrors the population that they typically serve. So making sure that you are being inclusive of all children, whether they are children with identified needs, children who are English language learners, children who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. This section also needs to include an evaluation component. So the SAU should be able to outline how they plan to evaluate the implementation and the effectiveness of the program. This should include methods for collecting information that will be useful to program development and ongoing improvement. And finally, a plan for sustainability. You should be able to describe how the SAU and, if applicable, its partners will ensure sustainability of pre-K programming that is started or expanded through these grant funds. The final section of the application is the budget. And this piece has several components to it that we're also going to look at in a little bit more detail. So first off, very important to keep in mind that the budget should encompass the overall projected expenses for the proposed project. Proposed budget for startup or expansion of public pre-K programming should only include allowable costs that were outlined earlier by Nicole for this grant program. Costs should be reasonable and justifiable for achieving high quality programming and meeting program standards. The project budget worksheets should be completed and should include descriptions of how projected costs, were determined. An estimation of the number of students to be served in the proposed project must be provided, as well as estimates of the state and local allocation funding and other sources of revenue that you may be combining with this particular grant funding. Additionally, the budget should be demonstrating some thinking towards sustainability. We recognize that the estimated allocation per student for your school systems is generally not determined until February. So in order for you to budget as reasonably as possible, we're going to ask that SAUs that are applying for this funding reach out to Tyler Backus. He and his team are going to help you determine what a reasonable estimated allocation would be as you're figuring that out for the estimated number of students that you plan to serve through this project. Okay, so when you open up the application and you get to the budget section, you're going to find several tables that need to be completed, and these begin on page 20 of the application. The first is a place for you to actually indicate the number of new students that would be enrolling and whether they are going to be enrolling in part-time programming, full day, full week programming, or if you are planning to shift from already existing part-time programs to full-time programs. Additionally, this is the space to indicate the number of new classroom spaces that you would be proposing to add through this project. Budget table number 2 is where you're going to be detailing what the expenses are by the various allowable cost categories in this RFA and providing an explanation to justify those expenses. After you have determined what those expenses are, you'll total them up, and then you're going to need to reduce from that total what your estimated allocation will be for those students. And then if you are planning to incorporate any other federal funding, for instance, if you wanted to coordinate some of your ESSER funding with this project, that would be potentially allowable, or you could conceivably be tapping into Title I funding. Any additional federal funding you would want to note there and back that out. And then if you are working with a partner and the partner might be providing some of the support or funding, that also would be backed out. And that will leave you with what your grant request would be. Nicole, you can go to the next. The third table is a way for you to show how you're going to use those various funding sources to cover those costs that are allowable in your project. So this is the point at which you're able to actually fill in and attribute how you plan to use state allocation versus where you might be placing the grant dollars. What you'll notice, and I'm noticing as I look at this table, that for some reason the blackened out area next to salaries for teachers under the pre-K expansion grant didn't transfer over to the slide. But when you see this table in the application, there is a dark black area there because grant funding cannot be used for the teacher position. It can be used for the ed tech positions in full day, full week programming or projects that are proposing that. Okay. Eligibility to submit bids and awards. All of the details on the next few slides are outlined on pages 5 and 6. But what you're going to find is that the department anticipates making multiple awards as a result of this request for applications. The number and the size of the awards will depend on the number of proposals received and available funds. Issuance of this RFA in no way constitutes a commitment by the state of Maine to make grant awards. Award sizes are estimated to range between $20,000 and $500,000. Applications will be evaluated after the due date, which is November 4th, and a selection package will be posted to the Division of Procurement Services website. Award amounts in the approved grant request will be finalized in February of 2022 once EPS allocations are finalized. And I do want to say a few words about that. Because the EPS allocations are not finalized until that time, even though SAUs that are successful with their applications will be notified of that, the department is going to hold off on writing the contracts until the allocations have been finalized so that we can make sure that the budgets that are proposed are as accurate as possible and that the final dollar amount that's awarded is in alignment with those allocations. So that's an important piece to understand. Even though you're applying now, the contracts will not be written until February or early March, depending on how that timing plays out. But the department will do its best to have those in place as quickly as possible. Additionally, within the scoring process for this RFA, it is critical that in order to be funded, an SAU must score a combined 65 points or more for within the points that are allocated to criteria 2 and criteria 3. So this will come up a little bit later when we look at how those points are associated with the different criteria. But please keep in mind that a fundable proposal will have to have at least 65 points associated with those 2 criteria. And then additionally, just remember that it's an SAU that is eligible to apply. Even though you might be applying in partnership, it's not the partner that can apply for this grant. It has to be the SAU.
Thanks, Leanne. So once applications have been scored, any person aggrieved by the award decision that results from this RFA may appeal the decision to the Director of the Bureau of General Services in the manner prescribed in 5 MRSA, etc. The appeal must be in writing, and it must be filed within 15 calendar days of receipt of notification of contract award. So any appeals in writing will be sent to this address, the Director of the Bureau of General Services at 9 State House Station in Augusta, Maine, 04333-0009. I'll leave it there for just a moment. As mentioned before, there are 2 statutes that are driving this work currently. So again, they're listed here. The pre-K expansion grants are authorized under Title 20A. And the pre-K expansion grants are also included in the priorities as described in the initiative contained in Public Law 2021. These are also highlighted again in the RFA on page 6. So submitting questions about the RFA. Any questions must be submitted by email to the grant coordinator, which is Leanne. Her email address is here, leanne.larson@maine.gov. And those need to be sent by October 15th, a week from tomorrow, by 11:59 p.m. local time. Any questions that are submitted must include the subject line, bolded here, RFA number 2021-07114, questions. The department assumes no liability for assuring accurate, complete, or on-time email transmission and receipt. Once all questions have been received by the deadline, there will be a question and answer summary. So responses to all questions will be compiled in writing and posted on the following website. This is our procurement site. This is also where you can find a link to the RFA. It's the responsibility of all interested parties to go to this website to obtain a copy of the question and answer summary. It's not something that we'll make a newsroom notification about. It'll be posted here by October 21st. Only those answers that are issued in writing on this website will be considered binding. So amendments to the RFA. This is more so in regards to our internal team monitoring the RFA, but of course the public needs to be made aware as well that all amendments, if there are any, released in regard to this RFA will be posted on the following website. Again, it's the same one that I just mentioned previously about the question and answer summary. It's our main.gov procurement site. If you don't have time to write this or have access to the link, you can also just Google Maine RFA and it should be one of the first searches to appear. It's the responsibility of all interested parties to go to this website to obtain amendments. Again, this isn't something that we'll make public by making a newsroom notification about. Any amendments that are made will be posted here. And I believe we have until 7 days prior to the proposals being due to make amendments, which puts us around October 28th. So you'll want to make sure to check back on that website prior to submitting your final submission at the end of the month to assure that no amendments have been made. If there are, this is where they'll be posted. And go back to you, Leanne.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, we are in the home stretch. So next slide is about submitting your application. And I'm just going to say these are all important details that you're going to want to go back to and make sure that you understand so that that really well-developed proposal gets submitted and ends up with us on time and doesn't end up not being able to be reviewed. So as we've said a number of times, applications are due by November 4th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. local time. So any application received after the 11:59 p.m. deadline would be deemed ineligible for award consideration. There are some very specific instructions that the Division of Procurement asks that applicants follow. First of which is that all applications be submitted via email to the address that you see on the screen right now, which is built into the application, proposals@maine.gov. Only applications received by email will be considered, and the department assumes no liability for assuring accurate and complete email transmission and receipt. Emails containing links to file sharing sites or online file repositories will not be accepted as transmissions. Only email applications that have the actual requested files attached will be accepted. Encrypted emails received which require opening attachments and logging into proprietary systems will not be accepted as submissions. Finally, file size limits are 25 megabytes per email. Applicants may submit files separately across multiple emails as necessary due to file size concerns. All emails and files must be received by the due date and time listed above. And finally, applicants are to insert the following into the subject line of their email submission: RFA number 2021-07114, application submission, then a dash, and then the applicant's name, which would be the SAU's name. And finally, applications are to be submitted as single typed PDF or Word files and must include pages 11 to 22 of the RFA document. That is where the application can be found. Okay. RFA proposals will be reviewed by a grant review team that will use a consensus approach to evaluate and score all sections that are outlined on this slide. Members of the review team will not score those sections individually, but instead will arrive at a consensus as to assignment of points for each of these sections. The scoring is broken into 4 different criteria. The first is the general information, which I mentioned earlier is the pass-fail section. But once again, you need to pass on that section in order for the rest of your proposal to be scored. Criteria 2, specifications of the work to be performed, includes the needs assessment and community coordination, the project overview, the project description, high quality program design, recruitment and enrollment, evaluation and sustainability, all of those sections of the application. And that section is worth 60 points. Criteria 3 is the budget proposal, and that includes both the budget narrative and budget forms, as well as the articulation of capacity for success and sustainability, which will be built into your budget narrative. That section is worth 25 points. Please remember that it's these 2 sections, criteria 2 and 3, that you must attain at least 65 points in for your project to be fundable. The final criteria is the priority point section. And as Nicole outlined earlier, there are 3 competitive priorities for this RFA: level of economic disadvantage, partnership with a community provider, and full day, full week programming. That, if you were to get all of those points, would be a maximum of 15 points. And total, the application has the full value at 100 points, possible points. Thanks, Nicole. Finally, there are 2 appendices that are included in the RFA that can be found on pages 23 through 26. The first, Appendix A, is guidance related to the provision of transportation. Costs associated with transportation are allowable in this RFA, but it will be very important if you're planning to include transportation with these funds to have reviewed that guidance to make sure that you know what is necessary when providing transportation for 4-year-olds. Appendix B, as I also mentioned earlier, details public pre-K partnership guidance. So if that is an option that you're pursuing, it would be in your best interest to have taken some time to read through Appendix B. There are some additional resources that I believe Anna has kindly been putting many of these actually already up into the chat box for you, but just in case, we have included on this slide the request for application, the site at which you can locate that, and the actual link to the document itself. A link to the pre-K guidebook, which I will just stress that that's a wonderful resource with lots and lots of information that can be helpful to SAUs as they are thinking about starting public pre-K programs. The guide itself also includes links to Chapter 124, which are the program standards that guide public pre-K programming in Maine. And it will behoove SAUs to make sure that they understand what's included and expected in those program standards. And then finally, the pre-K section of our early childhood website within the Department of Education's web pages is another wonderful resource for locating information that can help SAUs as they are preparing an application or thinking about starting public pre-K programs. And I think that brings us to the end of the slides anyway. So Anna, and Nina, I bet there are some questions in the chat box.
There are, and I can start out with some of them. Leanne, you did answer a number of them as we went through, and I can go back to those, but let's start with a couple that were not answered. one person asked, are costs associated with a part-time administrator allowable?
So there is on the list of allowable expenses, allowability for coordination of your public pre-K programming, and that could be something that an administrator or part-time administrator was providing.
Thanks. Another question was, I think you answered this, but I'll ask this again. Can buildings be purchased to house alternate classrooms so that pre-K can be in the school?
So I think I did answer it, but I'll answer it again. So in this particular RFA, the purchase of a modular classroom or a house isn't allowable. It is, these funds can be used to lease a modular classroom or to rent space in another building if you don't have the opportunity or space to put in a modular classroom. What I will say is that ESSER funds do provide that allowability. So if you're thinking about how you might braid together some of your available funding currently, that is an option to consider. The other thing that the department would strongly recommend SAUs think about if you are entertaining either the lease of a modular classroom or exploring the purchase of a modular classroom, is that you think about whether you're going to put your pre-K students in the classroom, or would it be better to put other grade levels in that classroom and move your pre-K students inside the building. And that's a decision that you'd have to give some thought to.
Another question is, will DOE partially fund part of the grant? So will it be fully funded, or can there be partially funded parts of the grant?
Not sure I'm understanding that question, Anna.
Yeah, I'm reading it and I'm not sure I fully understand it either. And I'm trying to remember if that was came from Colette. Colette, if you wanted to clarify that.
And I'll take a stab at it, and Colette, if I'm not answering it right, you can let us know. If you're asking, would the department end up awarding like part of what you're asking for in the grant funding? That is a possibility.
Yeah. She clarified and said, is it all or nothing?
Right,
Yeah.
all or nothing.
Right. No, it is possible for partial funding.
Thank you, Colette, for the clarification. And then the last question was from Colette was, does the playground area need to be fenced in?
Nicole, do you want to respond to that?
Sure thing. So great question. So public or playgrounds that are at schools for public pre-K students to utilize during their day do not necessarily have to be fenced in. So Chapter 124 does address this. The program standards are that there's at least 75 square feet per child outdoors, and that the space is has fencing or natural barriers. So what that basically means is, if your playground or the space outdoors that you're planning for your 4-year-olds to utilize abuts a parking lot or part of a road or running water, stream, brook, lake, then it might be a space where you want to consider fencing to protect students, of course, from entering any dangerous areas, but also to prevent things from the outside coming in, animals, people, threats, anything like that. However, if your outdoor space where 4-year-olds will utilize for the playground has a natural barrier like a natural woods line, or just the area itself is covered by the school buildings or property of the school, then that would be okay too. Again, it's about the safety of the students, not just for them being in the space of the playground and escaping, but the vice versa, keeping a space for intruders out and coming in. So just be mindful of where you intend to have that space outdoors and the safety around the barrier of that space. You certainly don't have to fence in a specific 75 square foot per student space if the outside is safe. I keep saying the same word multiple times.
And Lori had a follow-up question. She asked this question, I think, and you addressed it, Leanne, to a point, and then she had a follow-up question of what if there are no appropriate community partners for an SAU to partner with? Applications would then lose the opportunity to earn criteria 4 points, which seems to discriminate against rural SAUs that may not have community partners available.
So what I can say in regard to that is that part of the intention of this particular RFA is to encourage partnerships when possible. It was not made a requirement of the RFA, just a competitive priority. The most critical piece of the application for SAUs is the sections that are under criteria 2 and criteria 3, where in order to have a fundable proposal, you need to score at least 65 points total in those 2 areas. Obviously the competitive priority piece points will could come down to if there is an abundance of applications and not enough funding to support all of those applications. But the most essential piece is to make sure that criteria 2 and 3 are well developed in your application so that those points and that point threshold is met.
And one other, there are a couple more questions. If a district cannot accommodate all eligible interested students, can a lottery system be allowed for selection?
Nicole, do you want to take that one or do you want me to?
I'm happy to hop in. So this is sort of where we were mentioning earlier about encouraging districts to create enrollment policies, and we encourage that now. It's not necessarily tied to this grant opportunity. Just in general, it's good practice for enrollment policies to be developed, because we know that not every SAU can enroll all of the students that might be interested in registering. So in that scenario, yes, you certainly could have a lottery system. Districts get very creative in how they choose to enroll students or maintain wait lists. What I would ask or encourage you to do is have your process in writing and available to families prior to them registering, so that it's really clear ahead of time how you will enroll students if there's an abundance of registrations that you can accommodate for. So that might be a lottery system. Sometimes it's first come, first served. Like Leanne had mentioned too, we encourage you to, at the best possible, create those heterogeneous classrooms. So it's a mix of students from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of needs, and having that inclusivity present. So mirroring the rest of your school district's demographics is a really great way to set up an enrollment policy. If you have 20% special education needs in your K-12 population, could you save 20% of seats in your pre-K classroom for that? If your district has 50% free and reduced lunch rates, could 50% of your seats in pre-K be held for students who meet that criteria as well? So that your pre-K space mirrors the demographics of your K-12 space, and then you're really starting to create those heterogeneous classrooms. What happens is, if you have a first come, first serve policy, some parents are really savvy in getting everything in right in on day 1, day 2, or really quickly. And it can be detrimental to families who don't receive word of registration dates, or who aren't able to get their paperwork or registration packet passed in a timely manner. So we want to make sure that we're inclusive of all families and all students, and really being fair to those that of how we enroll our students. So having that in writing and having that available ahead of time is highly encouraged.
Thank you, Nicole. And then Sue Carter asked a question very early on, and I wanted to make sure we got back, didn't miss it. She explained that they have expanded their pre-K program 5 years ago to full-time, and then I assume 2 classrooms full-time. She said that this has been a hardship on the school. They've had to use conference room, computer lab because of this, both of which were not built for or meant to be used for classroom space. And their kindergarten classes have had to move out of the classroom that they were built for. And because of the need to meet pre-K and Head Start guidance. And they are now in a classroom that's not necessarily meant for kindergarten. So I guess the kindergartners are now in a classroom not necessarily meant for kindergarten classrooms and no bathrooms. So I think she's wondering if they could apply for the grant to address this issue.
Yeah. So the answer to that, unfortunately, Sue, would be no, because this grant is specifically to serve the pre-K population of 4-year-olds, not the K to 12 population.
And then Tracy had a couple questions, and I got the first one. What is the total amount of funding available for Maine? Leanne, can you answer that?
Yep. So as Nicole mentioned earlier, this is part of the American Rescue Plan funding that's allocated to the governor to help make decisions about how it's being spent. And in the statute that Nicole also mentioned related to the use of this funding, the governor allocated funding from the ARP funding she has access to many different projects, but for public pre-K expansion, $10 million was allocated to that. In this, the first year of the breakdown of that 10 million, $4 million is available to us for this round, or up to $4 million. And then the other 6 million would be in the next round of grants.
And then she had a follow-up question, and I think I'm trying to understand this, Tracy, but you say that funds for 2023 is grant funding. And if school year 2023 is funded by the grant, then we can assume that 2023-24 would include ongoing funding. And I'm assuming you're thinking of the EPS formula for 4-year-olds by DOE due to the prior year's child count.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yep.
Go ahead,
So hopefully, Tracy, this will help to answer your question. But part of the reason for the timing of this RFA in the window that it's been released is so that SAUs do have the ability to make sure that estimates for enrollment of their 4-year-olds can be included in the department's EPS formula as allocations are being generated for next year. That allows then that funding to be started up front in school year 22-23. So again, in the next round, if you're maintaining the same enrollment, that's going to be counted moving forward in your count. But if you apply, if an SAU applies again, whether it's to add more programming, so increasing the number of students that are being served, the timing of that will be such that those estimates can be in place in time for the 23-24 school year. We're anticipating that there will probably be an allowance to help continue to support projects from this first round. So you may not be increasing the population, but just looking for some additional support to help as you build sustainability of your programming over time. But at that point, your counts would already be included in your enrollment for the Division of Finance to be able to include that in the allocations. I don't know if that answered the question.
I think so. When you're saying timing, basically it's providing funds so there's not a year wait for the next school year. But then the years after that, the funding is included in the EPS based on their October child count ongoing.
Right. And even now, SAUs can estimate in October of the preceding school year. So like right now, that's something that they're able to notify the department of, that they are estimating that they're going to be, you know, starting a program, serving this many students, so that that estimation is in the calculation for the allocation, and it starts right with the school year they're starting.
I just want to add to that
Yeah,
is
go ahead, Paula.
specifically for new or expanding
Yes.
programs.
Right.
You kind of said it, but I want to make sure everybody understands
Yeah.
the estimate counts are only for new or expanding programs that have been
Right.
approved through your office.
Yes. But the already approved programs would already be in the count.
Right. So the already approved programs work just the way that Tracy was asking, based on prior year counts.
There is another funding question. There are two more questions. I'm going to switch, Paula, since you're on the line or already off mic, I'm going to ask the funding question next. So is pre-K funded differently than other educational costs in the funding formula? We are a minimum receiver. Does that mean it is unlikely that we would receive pre-K funding on the ED 279?
Minimum receivers are always fun to respond to based on the funding. The funding is done the same as all other funding for schools. However, that being said, you may be a minimum receiver now, but every year things change, and you may not always be a minimum receiver. And the way that minimum receivers are funded could also change in any given year, depending on statute. So what I would say is it's still extremely important that the funding or that the counts, I should say, for any of your programs, any of your enrollments, pre-K through 12, are properly put into the systems so that an allocation is properly determined as to what is needed in your district. And then from there, depending on what your ability to pay is based on the current formula, would certainly determine whether you're a minimum receiver or not. But either way, your allocation is very dependent upon the pre-K and all of the counts. And so it's just as important for a minimum receiver. You may not get what you would consider additional funding, but it's important that it be part of the allocation calculation. I hope that helps.
Great. And Eric had one more question. If he has any follow-up from that, he can either put it in the chat or go off mic, but I'll just ask his other question, which is a big one and might need further conversations, but how exactly would partnering with the Head Start program work?
Yep. Is Nina still on, or Nicole? You can, I mean, any one of us could probably do that, but I'm wondering, Nina, if that might be a good one for you to jump in on.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest and say that's a very large question that I can't really summarize in a 1 or 2 sentence answer. What I can say though is that really thinking about, you know, the benefits to partnering with a Head Start program, you know, when we think about those comprehensive services that Head Start provides, the ability to braid and blend federal funding with the state funding, to support those children in those classrooms, are, you know, critical components of partnering with a Head Start program. That this would definitely be another whole conversation that I think that we would need to have outside of this time frame.
Yeah, but if that's something that an SAU is interested in understanding better and pursuing, Nina and Nicole would be available to provide some technical assistance related to that. I would also say, Eric, strongly encourage you to listen to the series that was recorded around partnerships, because that provides a lot of helpful information if you're thinking about engaging in a partnership. And Nina would also be able to point you to who the Head Start director is for the organization that supports Head Start in your catchment area, and just reaching out for a conversation with that Head Start director to explore possibilities might be one of the first steps to thinking about whether that might be a possibility.
I apologize. I was having trouble with my computer. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone have any more questions? I think that's it, Leanne, in terms of questions.
Okay.
Oh,
Can I ask a question? And I'm sorry, I'm not putting it in the chat. I understand you could include in the budget ed tech personnel needs if you're offering a school day program. But you certainly can include your teacher salary costs as well, correct? There was just no mention of the word teacher. So not at all. That seemed a little confusing to me. So could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. So maybe a place that would help to think about that, Tracy, in terms of like the budget table layout, is that funding that you will be committing through your allocation portion, that can be used to support the teacher positions. It could also be used to support ed techs, but for SAUs that are applying for full day programs where they wouldn't be running 2 sessions, the grant funding is going to be allowable to support the ed tech position to help with that 1-to-8 ratio that is necessary in classrooms. So, and it's also, if you're running part-day programs and you are serving, let's say 16 students in the morning and 16 in the afternoon, you're going to be drawing more allocation for those students than if you were running just for 16 for a full day. So the RFA is designed to try to help support some of the additional cost that comes when moving to full day to support the staff and student ratio.
So for a program that's expanding and they want to start a brand new classroom, you cannot include your teacher.
You cannot use the grant funds for the teacher, but you're going to, if you're starting a brand new program and you're going to be enrolling students, you're going to be having allocation for those students. So that's a part of your funding source.
So because EPS would pay for that, but you don't have that. I mean, it's not, you haven't started it up. And
well, but because you're estimating now for
Oh,
next year, you will have that.
okay.
Does that? That's why we're asking SAUs to estimate their counts now.
Okay.
So
That's another part of this process.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Leanne, there's a couple more questions.
Okay. Whoop.
So one of them is, if an SAU is planning on partnering, would this be considered a new program?
I guess that would, if you don't already have a program and you're starting a program with a partnership, that's going to be considered starting a new program. If you have a program already and you were looking to partner, if you're looking to partner in order to expand the number of students that you could serve, that would be allowable. Or if you were looking to partner in order to move from part day to full day programming, that would be allowable as well. I'm not sure if that's answering the question, Marcia.
I think it's just a,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks so much.
okay.
All right, so there's another question.
Okay.
It's a two-part question. So
Yep.
are community partnerships only having a pre-K classroom hosted in a community partners facility? Or does it include collaborating on providing services like school day programming in the school and after school in the partner space?
Nicole, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the quick answer to that is no. So the grant funding is meant to support 4-year-olds while they're receiving their public education hours. So if they go to your school program for however many hours and then leave and physically transition to a community space for aftercare, these grants wouldn't support that in terms of a partnership. However, if those students were receiving the public education at a partner's location for their school hours, we have many partnerships that exist that way, then the funding would support that type of a partnership. It really comes down to where are the students receiving those school hours, in the school or in the partner, as opposed to before and after care or like a wraparound service.
Right. Although a partner could operate within the school system's building.
Yep.
For the publicly provided preschool programming. So you could have a Head Start that is operating inside an SAU's building and serving students.
There are no further questions in the chat.
Okay. So we'll take one last call. Anyone else have an additional question this afternoon that they either want to put in the chat or ask before we close this informational session? Okay, seeing no hands up, nobody's come off of mute, and seeing no additional questions in the chat box, thank you very much for attending the session this afternoon. We hope that it was helpful to you. And we're looking forward to receiving applications and working collaboratively with SAUs and potentially their partners in this work of expanding public pre-K in our state.